Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We have an awesome topic on deck for you today. We're going to be talking about the top 10 ways that you should be preparing today to be ready for and to smash your busy season when it hits in a couple of months here. I know right now with the winter and the snow on the ground, the frozen ground, it might be a lull in your business, but in couple of months, your phones are going to be ringing off the hook. So let's talk about some of the top tips for doing a fantastic job when that does start happening. We have some awesome presenters today, but before I get to them, I do want to go over just a couple of housekeeping details. There is a chat box on the right of your screen. If at any point today you have any questions for our presenters or for us, feel free to type your questions in there. We'll be trying to answer as many questions in the chat box live as possible, but if there are any that we don't get to in the hour that we have here today, we will reply to you by email within 24 hours here. There's also going to be some awesome resources that we have. You'll notice there's a handouts tab on the right side as well. Feel free to click that handouts tab, download those resources. They'll help you out with the content of today's webinar. We'll even put the slides up there as well. Today's webinar will also be recorded. We get that question quite often, but we will be sending out the recording again within 24 hours of the webinar closing today. So feel free to check your email if you want to share that with any peers or colleagues. You can certainly do that. Without further ado, though, I do want to introduce our moderator, Crystal. Crystal is an account executive here at ArcSite, and Crystal is going to introduce our special guest, David, and she's going to take it away with the rest of the presentation. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, if you have any questions, issues, or concerns, feel free to type those in the chat box. Thanks.
Thank you, Chad. Like you said, I'm Crystal, an account executive here with ArcSite. But more importantly, we have the honor of bringing David Gatto in here. He's the owner of Future Solutions Fence. And without going into too much detail, David, if you could actually intro yourself and give us a little background on your experience before we get into the 10 ways to smash your business in the busy season, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. Thanks for having me on the show, guys. So my name is David Gatto. I'm in York, Pennsylvania. I am the owner, operator, and founder of Future Solutions Fence and Fence Supply. Basically what we do, we are a fence manufacturer and a fence installation company. We supply 64 other companies in 5 states with materials, fencing companies, contractors, DIY homeowners. We're licensed in Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into our first question here. David, can you help us understand why it's so important to reevaluate your status quo at this time of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good way for me to start this off is by actually defining what the status quo is. So to simplify the status quo, my take on what it means is to what's happening right now. How are things right now? So, one of the things that I like to do and the exercises that I like to do with my team members is to empower them to be able to ask a question, to question something. Why is this the way that it is right now? Just for an example, something that we had done at our warehouse, just to give you guys a realistic picture of what this is right here is, so in our gate room, we build our gates for, let's say, our vinyl gates. And so the guys are building the vinyl gates and wrapping them and bringing them all the way across the warehouse and then bringing them further away from where they actually have to go. And so, we asked that question. We said, why are we doing this? Why is this over here? Why are they being brought over here? Why are we adding all these extra steps? And then we find a way to solve that problem and say, okay, well, here's a better way to do it, because in so many different industries and so many different companies, I feel like team members are that they're not valued, their opinions aren't valued, and so they're scared to ask questions. And the real reality is that a lot of team members actually have really good ideas, and so to be able to empower them, to let them know, hey, it's okay to ask this question, ask why this is the way it is. If it's not making sense, we want to know about that. We actually have an idea board at our warehouse where people write ideas down and we go over them. So, just questioning the way, why is it this way? Why can't it be done like that? So, that's a big reason to reevaluate the status quo, because that equates to a lot of extra net dollars for the company, and a lot of saved productivity time, a lot of saving energy, things like that.
It makes perfect sense, especially because it sounds like a lot of the guys in the field, like they want to save as much time as possible. And so sometimes with leadership not being the one, in the field all the time, it's kind of like those are the best people to listen to because they're the ones constantly doing, all the work and running into some of these issues that, in my opinion, they would know the most. So that makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So does employee empowerment pertain to contracting businesses, and how do you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I learned is that a lot of industries are the same, a lot of businesses are the same, a lot of components are the same. Business is business. So, one of the things that I think back to when I see that is one of my first coaches. His name was Mike Rogers. He was actually, and he wouldn't be mad if I said his name. One of the things, he was a real estate agent, and so he would train me more geared on the marketing side of things that I can use in my business. So I took things from the real estate business and used them in my business that worked for me. It made them work for me. So I kind of think this is universal all the way around the board. And, especially in contracting, because here's what happens. So, a boss or a lead or a supervisor will delegate a task to a team member and say, okay, you're in charge of this, train them how to do it, and they're doing this. And then a mistake happens, and instantly, they put on the cape, they're Superman, they come flying in there, they get scared, they take the task from them, and they don't allow them to make that mistake and learn. So, one of the important things with doing that is that when you give somebody a task, like obviously if they're messing up all the time and it's not right for them, then of course they got to be taken off. But there's going to be mistakes that are happening. So when you come in there and you play the superhero, after you already empowered a team member, I don't like to use the word employee, but after we empowered a team member, and then to take that, once you take that from them, the relationship's over. Their ego's been affected, their self-confidence is stricken down, they may become bitter, so that's one really important thing. And you can avoid a lot of those pitfalls by knowing how to delegate properly. Training a person, and when they're ready, letting them go and training the right person. Actually, Justin me and him had a brief conversation about that today. And, so that's really, really important as far as empowering is concerned, and also to give them positive feedback. When somebody does something that's good, to acknowledge it and to encourage that behavior and to keep them thinking in those terms, in that lineal fashion. I like to say neurons that, fire together, wire together, so it's really important that we encourage them, that we delegate tasks to them, and that we trust them. Because, a lot of times people might have hidden potential that, they're never able to exercise it because nobody actually even trusted them and gave them, the ability to even try to do it. So, empowerment is huge, and it definitely pertains in the contracting business because we want confident people out there, confident installers in the field, confident production managers, confident sales agents out there, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. To piggyback just off your last point there, there's people that could have really valuable insight, but you just don't know. And I always think about how like we're all the way we are from our previous, situations and experiences. So if I've been in an environment before where I was never encouraged to share my ideas, then I'm going to automatically assume that I cannot do that here. So it's on the leaders to like kind of navigate that, and I would think create a very open space for feedback and insight and obviously empowerment. So
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be able to pick somebody's strength out and be able to capitalize on that and find out what they're good at, and maybe they're better at something than somebody else is, and put them in that, kind of flip flop around, kind of the assist, what we call it in football. So it's really important to be able to notice that talent in people, and then, like I said, capitalize on it.
Agreed. So how do you hire, retain, and train top talent?
you know, we can have a whole webinar about this, because this is probably one of the biggest struggles that entrepreneurs deal with, from a lot of different standpoints. I mean, there's a lot of fear that an entrepreneur, a business owner might feel hiring somebody on, like, hey, can I continue to keep this person working? What if I'm not good at managing? What if they get hurt? All these things play into that. So it's very hard for them to even make the actual move to hire somebody. So one of the ways that we hire is, okay, so we got to keep a couple things in mind here, is how much does it cost to train a team member? Anywhere is upwards of 10,000. So if we're going to hire a team member, we have to make sure that this person is going to stay, that we are not going to have to let them go. It's going to happen anyways, but we want to really invest in this person. So, I mean, we hire, fire, and reward around our core values. What we believe in as a company. This is a set of values that we had to, really think about, like, what are we about? What do we stand for? What standard do we hold here? And so when we're interviewing people, we do a thorough background check. Well, we test for drugs. We check up on references. We look at employee track record. If you've had 20 jobs in the last 20 years, that's a red flag. If you don't want to go down to Concentra to get a drug test, well, that's a red flag. And, so another thing that this topic is hitting on is, training top talent. And in order to be able to train the top talent, you have to attract the top talent, which means you have to have features and benefits built in. I can't just hire people like, hey, you're going to get $20 an hour off the books. People don't want to hear that. People want steady. They want secure. They want to hear that there's benefits. They want to hear that there's paid vacation, paid time off. They want to hear that there's holiday pay, Christmas parties, profit sharing programs, and they definitely want to hear that there's room for advancement. And some people don't want to advance, but most people do. So, and all those things in there, so that will bring the talent to you, and that will also help in retaining the talent, and then training them properly. They sometimes somebody needs, upwards of 6 months of training for somebody to be constantly with them, constantly correcting them, and we want to invest that time in them, because when we're ready, we let them go. And, we have several different positions, from, management to sales to installation. So certain tasks take certain different time frames to train people. But like I said, you got to keep the end in mind. You do not want to be letting people go, because you got to think of all the other implications that happen when you have to let somebody go. Sometimes it's pretty and it's sweet and everybody goes on their own way, but a lot of times in the real world, it's not. People get vindictive. People want to call the labor board. People want to file for unemployment. People want to take you to court. So those are all things. They want to bring your company on a smearing campaign. So these are all things that you really have to think of, like, hey, what's this guy's attitude like? Is he going to jive with everybody else here? Does he have any type of experience in this? So this is a real murky subject, and one that people are not very good at, because they don't take the time. They don't take the time to investigate. They wait till the last minute to hire somebody when they just need a body in there on the production floor or out there. So they really go in the wrong places looking for people. They go to halfway houses, soup kitchen, drug rehabs, all stuff where people really aren't going to last long, and they don't do a lot of investigation. So they end up losing these people. And when they lose key people, then all of a sudden they find themselves back out there in the field. And if they're in the field, I hate to tell you this, but you're going backwards, because you're working in your business at that point and you're not working on it. So this subject right here, this is of the utmost importance. And really, knowing how to do it and taking the time to hire the right person. Because a lot of people talk a good game, and they're really good bull crappers. So you got to be able to cut through that and see, and also to have more than one interview. We always have more than one interview, and we bring some of our key staff members in on those interviews, because they're the ones that are going to be training them. They're the ones that are going to be rewarding them, so we want to make sure that, we're not getting a bad apple in there that's going to spoil the whole bushel, as they say.
Yeah. I remember reading a quote, probably it was in my first job, and it was on LinkedIn, some inspirational type post, but I'll never forget it because it was, and you might have heard this. Let's see if I can get this right. It was the CFO asked the CEO, what if we invest in all these employees and train them and they leave? And the CEO said, what if we don't and they stay? And that is exactly it. And I think like a lot of companies they forget, they lose sight of the big picture and think about like, if my employees are happy and if we're doing the right things, we're going to all make money. Of course, it's not always going to be perfect, but like, that's the goal, is just to grow the business. And so if we're doing it, putting people in mind first, of course, I don't own a business, similar to like what you own, but at the end of the day, business is business and people are people, and they just want to feel listened to and appreciated. And I would think that that's kind of like the snowball effect in a good way. So.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So why is the slow season the right time to focus on the business, and what activities should you be doing?
Yeah, this is a really good one right here, because, it's so easy to forget where you were just a few months ago. The chaos that was actually ensuing out there on the production floor, the noise has come to a crescendo out there. There's bottlenecks in the parking lot. The phones are ringing off the hook. Some people got, 2 phones in their hand at one time. You got people hiding for space just to get out of the noise to talk to somebody. There's paperwork spread out on the floor, all this stuff. And you forget where that, you tend to forget. Although I know I used to anyways, when it got slow, and so we remember that now. And so what we do, instead of like laying people off, like a lot of people do in the winter months, we pay to keep them on board. But what we're doing is actually much more productive than typically what we would be doing if we were in full swing, because we're actually finding ways and means to lean up, and we're keeping them employed full time, which is great for employee retention, team member retention, because what we don't want is to lay somebody off and for them to go find another job and not come back to us, after we spent, 10,000 plus training them. So what we do, and this goes into culture building right here, is we let the staff come up with ways to become more lean, more efficient. We let them exercise their ideas now. My guys have been doing this for years now. And so their minds are kind of tuned in to this already. So every year the ideas get better and better. For instance, one that the guys just did is they said, hey, why do we have all these shop vacs all over the warehouse, and they're blowing up all the time, and we got to pick this heavy thing up and hump it all the way over here to this workstation. They said, hey, why don't we install a commercial central vac in the building? And so I heard that idea. I said, wow, why didn't I ever think about that? And then I'm empowering them and saying, okay, let's get the parts ordered up, let's get it installed. So the things that you do now while you are slow, you will appreciate every single time that thing comes up into use. Another thing, for instance, real quick, I'm just giving out some examples. We had a contractor complain the other day and say, hey man, I waited in line out here for 25 minutes to get loaded up. I feel like I have bought more than everybody else here, and that I should have been loaded up first, and all this other stuff. So, we got together as a team and we said, how do we speed this process up in the loading area? How do we get these trucks in and out? what could we do? And we went through our whole process, which is documented, which is extraordinarily important for the value of your company and for your processes and procedures. And we said, okay, why are we counting this twice? Why is it getting counted here and then it gets counted again? Because that's taking 10, 15 minutes of load time. This should be counted already. And so the guys came up with a system. They put a whole nother weigh station and labeling printing system in another part of the warehouse. And they said, okay, we'll take it off the shrink wrapping machine. We'll put it over here on the scale. We'll weigh it. We'll do a count, and we'll put a green sticker on all four corners, which indicates that it's been double checked, and we'll put a label on it. So the guys will be able to, at a glance, and say, okay, there's 4 skids with this, 2 hardware bags, a skid of concrete. So they'll say, hey, that's all that's on this guy's truck. We're good to go. They don't got to go and count everything. So, we're always finding ways to be more efficient, and you better do it while you're down. And so when you're doing this and you're leaning up and you're refining your processes, your procedures, and figuring out ways to do things better, when it does get busy, you will be able to scale. You'll be able to shoot straight up like a rocket, as opposed to these problems happening while you're in the midst of your busy season. Then you don't have time to make the changes. You don't have time to make the adjustments. And I'm going to tell you right now that some of the adjustments that we have made, we're to the tune of paper millions saved and netted in our company. We're able to invest in new things, new forklifts, new CNC machines, new computers, bigger Christmas parties, bigger bonuses, and the culture that we were able to build. And for the guys to know, like, hey, this was, and the girls, like, this was our idea. They feel really, really, really proud about that. And, right now is the time to do it. I mean, we haven't technically slowed down yet, but February is usually our slowest month. But, end of March, April, it's on. So we have to do everything now while we can, and just really sit down and think, like, what's my biggest pinch point right now? Where am I struggling the most? What's slowing us down the most? What's holding us back the most? And then make a list of that stuff that's on there and start going through that list and involve your staff with that list.
Brings it full circle to the employee empowerment. Makes perfect sense. How can you make sure you're covered fully from a legal point of view?
Yes, again, this is something, again, we can have a whole entire webinar on. You really got to be careful here because, and I've seen it happen, you can lose your whole entire business with one mistake. And, from a legal point, some of the things that come into my mind are, you might not be to the point where you can afford workers' compensation insurance, and you got guys out there working on somebody's property and somebody hits a gas line and there's an explosion or a piece of equipment rolls over on somebody. And I'm speaking from experience here. I've seen people, get their, I've seen somebody lose an arm at work and I had to hold a tourniquet around the stump on their shoulder. I've seen people lose fingers. I've seen people get really, really hurt at work. And, you have got to make sure that those insurances are in place and the right type of insurance. You got to make sure that the team member is classified properly. Because if you got this guy classified as an office administrator, just because you only have to pay 15 cents on the dollar or whatever it might be, the workers' compensation rate, as opposed to, a much bigger percentage if they were out there in the field operating, you got to make sure that they're properly classified, number one, and that there's a description of what they do in that. So if they do get hurt out there, you're covered and they're covered, and so even for liability insurance, you have to make sure that your liability insurance is in place and that you're classified properly. I know people who are classified as being handymen because they get a low rate, but they're actually in the manufacturing space, so what happens when somebody out there gets hurt on the production floor and then OSHA is going to come down there And then they're going to come to your insurance and they're going to go, oh, well, and the insurance company's going to say, well, he wasn't covered for that, because they're not trying to pay that money. You're actually responsible because you didn't exercise the due diligence or honesty to make sure that you are classed properly, because it costs a lot more money. As opposed, you might pay $600 a year to be a handyman, but you should be paying around $8,000 or $9,000. I'm just throwing the numbers out there, roundabout numbers, to be specific. But you got to have that stuff in place, and also you got to have an employee handbook in place. And I'm speaking from experience here with mistakes that have happened where, they said, hey, we want a copy of your employee handbook. We want a copy of such and such as a job description. We need to know exactly what happened. Were they working in the capacity that they were supposed to? Why is this guy listed as a forklift operator and he got his finger cut off on the CNC machine? What was going on there? He wasn't properly classified. So having an employee handbook with job descriptions is key as well. And, if you're subcontracting, I talk about this a lot, make sure you're properly classing your subcontractors, because workers' compensation, for instance, we paid out probably close to $1 million in subcontractors. So what workers' compensation is going to say is they want to find a way to make sure to see if they could class them as an employee, as a W-2 employee. So you got to be really well versed, have subcontractor, independent contractor agreements in place. You got to make sure you're following all the rules, that they're using all their own tools, they're making their own hours, they're coming up with what they're going to get paid. They're not working for you strictly. They they sub for other companies as well. They're on a job by job basis, that they're not, just working for you with no end in mind. All things like that you got to be super careful for, and having a lawyer on retainer. You have to have processes and procedures in place. What do I do if a customer burns me out of $40,000 or $100,000? What's the procedure? After how long do I go to the courthouse? When do I send out a certified letter? When do I send the sheriff out? And have this stuff documented so that your administrators can say, hey, this guy's not paying here. It's been 30 days. We're going to send out a certified letter, then we're going to proceed to court. So from a legal standpoint, the proper insurances, the proper business licenses, making sure, you're paying your proper, mercantile taxes and things like that. That's all very important, because you could lose it all with one mistake. And the honest truth is, if you're small, you're not going to be able to recover from that. You're not going to have the money. You're not going to be able to bring in a big high-powered attorney, that you pay millions of dollars to, that'll get you out of it. It could collapse your business, and you have to start from scratch again. I'm not saying we'll put you out, like your life's going to go to shambles, but you might have to start over.
Right. Okay. I will say, maybe this is just on my end, but it looks like your video froze, David. And did it freeze on your end?
No, it's not frozen on my end.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll move on then. All right. Number 6, contingency planning. How did you respond to rapidly changing business conditions?
Yeah, so I'm going to use an example here, and I think a lot of us can relate to this, but when they shut us all down for the corona, that was a rapidly changing business condition right there. So we put in all the stuff that we could to try to say that we were essential, and of course we got denied. Even though Lowe's and Home Depot, those guys were still out there installing because they're a FEMA. So I had to say, well, we're not going to be able to stop making the payments on our building, our trucks, our equipment, stuff like that. Our insurances kept charging us. Everybody just kept charging us. So we had to bring in some sort of an income. So we had to get creative. And instead of panicking and saying, oh, okay, I'm just going to wait for these checks to come in and hope everything's okay, what we started doing is we started retooling, like the second day. And so what we had done is we were in contact with chemical suppliers, bottling companies, labeling companies. We partnered up with another company, a graphics designer, and we started selling hand sanitizer. So we broke our production lines down and made new production lines. I mean, we were pumping out so much hand sanitizer. We were getting deliveries of 50-gallon drums of pure sanitizer I mean, they were coming in and out of there like hotcakes.
Mhm.
So, you know, you got to think quick when you're an entrepreneur. Anything can happen. I mean, that's just one example of what possibly could happen. Now, do we have a documented contingency plan? No, we don't. We don't have anything that's actually documented. Like, here's what happens here if this changes in this condition. Everything's been pretty steady. That was the first like major upset in our company right there that happened with the coronavirus, and we responded rapidly, and we made a ton of money, you know, which was really good. Everybody was still able to stay employed, and you know, we used all the credits correctly that we were supposed to use, and we did get money. And you know, so you got to be able to think on your feet quickly.
Mhm. What can you do to streamline your operations so that jobs are completed on time and on budget?
Yeah, so we're huge on this. We are huge on this. We're completely paperless. We have, if we've seen a piece of paper anywhere, we said, okay, how can we eliminate this? How, one of the things that, one of the biggest time savers I'm going to say is, you know, using a Zapier. I think that's how you say it. So we use Zaps to do back end work on the office. Like, so how our process, how it's streamlined with us is that when somebody schedules an estimate, they don't actually talk to anybody. They get right on our website, they schedule, it pops up on the platforms for the estimators. Zapier takes it, puts it into ArcSight, creates a project, it pulls from ArcSight into Job Nimbus, creates tasks, assign a salesman to it with a reminder. And so all that back end work, all that input and double entry was taken off the table, you know. And so that's a big thing. If there's a way that we can, you know, connect something to Zap and have it done automatically, that is a huge time saver because, you know, we might be doing 80, 90, 100 estimates a week in the busy season. And can you imagine all that double entry that would happen? And then another thing was a huge game changer for us is ArcSight. Honestly, I mean, the way that we used to actually estimate, and I've talked about this before, is our estimators would go out there, they would measure a job out, they would sketch it on like a pad, a piece of graph paper, and then they would take a picture of that and send it into the office. And the office had templates that they had put together so they could kind of speed it up and just input some information there, change some things around, pop some numbers in there. So then they would take that, email it to the customer, and then follow up with the customer. Then the customer would call us back, and then we'd have to scan everything, put it through DocuSign, and then send that back to them, and then send an invoice. So what we did now is the guys go out there. The way that we got our ArcSight set up, we're the only full service company in the state of Pennsylvania. We handle it all: permits, HOAs, property boundary surveys, dirt cleanup, removal, design, installation, financing, the whole 9 yards, so that the homeowner doesn't have to do anything. You know, so they go out there with the tablet, they draw this thing up and hit export, and there it is, right there. There's no back end work, there's no screenshotting. Send it to the office having to draw this out on a better, you know, piece of graph paper and scan it and send it all out. You know, the office was literally inundated with all this stuff as it was coming in, and it didn't open up any other windows for them. So when we started doing it differently, they started exporting it right there. They get the signature right there. They take a payment right there, and it's uploaded into the CRM, into Nimbus, creates a task for the administration. The administration takes that, sends it through DocuSign, because, you know, it's really not, from a legalistic standpoint, that signature is not legally binding on the tablet. So we like to send everything. We use DocuSign for everything, for the, you know, signing of the employee handbooks, the independent contractor agreements. If somebody gets injured, you know, we're having a work site injury form pulled up, that gets everything's DocuSign. That way, you know, you can keep a whole document together and sign it. Because I mean, if you have just a paper document and there's a signature page on it, they can say, well, I just signed this piece of paper. Where's the rest of the paper? I never got this other paper. So, you know, from a streamline standpoint, I mean, that has been a massive game changer. Even to the way that BOLs are signed. They're all on the tablets. And so when we deliver something to a customer, they got to verify and they got to sign the tablet, and then that stores it as a signature. And as far as, making sure that jobs are complete on time and on a budget, that's a whole nother ball game, because there's so many variables that can happen. There could be a hard dig, a water line could get struck, fiber optic cable could get struck. Next thing you know, project's on hold, and they got to come in there and they got to trench somebody's yard up. It holds the whole process up. So that part is kind of hard. And when you're running all subs, like we are, you could give them time frames, but you're really not allowed to have a supervisor on site. But one thing that we do is we make sure we're on budget. We got limits on everything. We got clauses in our customer agreement, which is in our contract. If we run into a hard dig, here's what happens. Here's the process. Here's the charges. Here's the procedure. Stop the job, call into the office, get the customer on there, show them what's going on, tell them how much it's going to be, ask them if they're okay with it, and move on. And being able to properly, do job costing. And that's like in the science of business of, we really broke this thing down. And, I could go into all the equations and stuff like that, but we really broke it down. We know exactly what it costs per hour to keep our building open, And so that entails getting all your overhead costs together, all your indirect and direct costs together. And that goes with pricing. How much production time is put into a piece of material? How much overhead do we have to allocate for an order this size to go in? So there's a lot of stuff that we actually do have in place to make sure that we are in budget. A lot of stuff internally, a lot of spreadsheets and things that we use. We use a lot of QuickBooks, and we could see our ROI on new investments. For instance, we just got another shrink wrapper machine. We could say, okay, how much money is this actually saving the company? How many man hours does this save? And what does it cost for a team member? 190 hours for a team member. What does it really costed us? And they could be doing other things and saving their back while this thing's wrapping. So being able to job cost and things of that nature. I mean, some people, unless you have a really, really large company, you're not going to have a CFO in your company. Most fence companies that I know personally don't have a CFO. They don't know how to read their books. They don't know what it costs to have their doors open on a regular basis. They don't know what their utilities are. They're just kind of paying all these bills. And until you really sit down, you should do that exercise once a year, at least annually, where you go over and you compare it to the last year. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to really get into the metrics, and find out how much is each team member producing. And I'm just going to throw a metric out there that the Fortune 500 companies use. Each team member should be producing $250,000 every single year.
Mm-hmm.
We're better. We're in better than that, but we worked really hard to do that. And there's real simple equations. I mean, we're talking addition, subtraction, and dividing, all this stuff.
Right.
And just knowing, like, hey, this happens. What really happened? Is this a debit? Is this a credit? Assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. Things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some best practices for encouraging a culture of safety?
Yeah, so this is really, really important. And I kind of touched on it before. I had seen some really bad injuries happen at work, but a lot of things that companies do, and something that we do, is first off, we let the team member know that their safety is number one, that's the most important thing. This is not about money. It's not about saving money. Somebody could get hurt. Your life is at stake. This is not that important. So having safety meetings, going over things with team members that they might have forgotten about, because a lot of injuries come from people getting comfortable with something that has moving parts on it. they got loose clothing in, they're not supposed to be wearing loose clothing. So you should sort of, I know we have it in our employee handbook, our team member handbook, of what proper attire, steel toe boots, anti-slip, that type of stuff, and to remind people what can happen. Have a safety meeting, have it once a week, have it once a month, reward team members. We went 90 days without an injury here, without a job site injury, without a reported injury. Being able to put that stuff out there and to have those safety meetings builds culture. And it, like I said, it lets the team member know that their safety is number one. That's super, super important. And injuries are going to happen. And sometimes people are going to make it up. That's just the reality. They're going to say they hurt their back and they didn't, and it could be something as small as somebody slipping and falling on ice outside the warehouse, and then also, we encourage a culture of safety too, to protect people coming into our establishment, because we know we have a big showroom in there and people come in from off the streets, and we put all kinds of safety features and bollards, and they got to stay in the yellow lines, and they got to stay behind the fence, and there's a path that they take. There's restricted areas. We don't want people getting hit with a forklift, and just reminding people, don't come in and out of the building without beeping your horn. Have your forks down and pointed down in the forklifts when you're coming in and out of entryways. When you're backing up, use the mirrors. Make sure nobody's around you. If you're not certified on the forklift, don't get on the forklift. Supplying them with safety gear, with glasses, supplying them with hard hats, supplying them with ear plugs. When we tore our building out, we have hard hats for everybody. We have safety goggles for everybody. We have earplugs for everybody. You got to protect the people coming into the business, as well as protect the team members. And they got to be trained on that, because they're the ones interacting with them. I'm not, so they got to be looking out for them. Because what if somebody walks in your building and gets hit with a forklift? Well, there's going to be some major problems. And then if OSHA comes in there afterwards, which they will, and say, hey, where's your yellow markings? Where's your walkway? Where's your wheelchair ramp that it says you have on Google here? Like, where's this? Where's that? What about this electrical box? And you're going to find yourself in a whole world of trouble. And, it really boils down to that is the last thing that you want to happen is for somebody to get hurt at work. I mean, these guys are genuinely more important than the operation going on. I mean, they got families, they got kids, they got wives, they got dreams and aspirations. You do not want somebody losing their life at work. And I always tell the guys the story about it. When I was working at Waste Management, the guy got his arm ripped off. I tell that story. I use that one a lot. And it happened from something that you wouldn't even think it could happen. The guy got a conveyor belt ripped it off. So I tell that story to the guys, and it works. And we talk about safety a lot there. Because people could get hearing damage. There's moving parts. There's things, plastic flying around in there and stuff like that. So it's super important.
Yeah, even trash on the floor. It's the little things that people just have to stay on top of, and they sometimes just don't. Number 9, why is it so important to find a mentor, especially one who lines up with your own business values?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good question. This is an important one. I do have several mentors. I have a business coach, and so one of the things that I look for when I'm finding a mentor or looking for a business coach is I want to make sure that they're meeting certain criteria. I want to make sure that they've had a business and built a business up like I did, or maybe they have multiple businesses. I want to know that it's successful. I want to know that it applies to my industry. I also want to know what their family life looks like. Are you a workaholic that's a really great provider and you're never home and your kids don't know who you are? I don't want to know how to do that right there. So that's really important for me, because, one thing that I'll never do is I don't ever want my family to say that about me. Oh, he was a provider, but we really didn't know him. He missed all of our games. It's not that important. Business is not that important, because but you will regret that one day, and it could turn into a divorce. It could turn into a lot of things. So that part is really important for me.
Mhm.
And then also too, I want to know that this person is physically healthy. That longevity and health is important to them.
Right.
I mean, I'm in the gym every single day. I go there. It's not a question. I'm there at 5:45 every single day. I'm dedicated. So I like to be on that same level with a mentor.
Mhm.
Because honestly, if somebody's doing something that I don't approve of, I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody else, but if this person's like severely out of shit, I see it all the time in the gym. I'm sorry, but I see it all the time in the gym. You got some severely out of shape personal trainer. This is a great example. And I'm like, how is it possible that this person is training this person? Like, I wouldn't want what they got.
Mhm.
So why are they training them? Oh, well, maybe they have knowledge or something like that. But, I'm sorry, it's not there for me. If I don't see it, you could be book read all you want and know all the stuff. But if you're not living that life, I don't want nothing to do with it. So I got to make sure that all of our stuff's lining up, that, you're on board with me where I'm going, where I'm at, and where I'm trying to go right now.
Mhm.
And you exhibit those qualities that I'm striving to exhibit, because it's really, it's not promotion, it's attraction by example.
Mhm.
Is I want to be attracted, not in a physical way, but attracted to that person, to the lifestyle that they're living. I want what they got, so
Mhm.
I'm going to do what they tell me to do to get where they got, you know,
Mhm.
that type of thing. So that's really important. Like, just because people say somebody's like some sort of industry, leader or guru. I mean, you got 18-year-old kids out there that are life coaches. Like, come on, man. You're 18 years old. You haven't even lived life yet. How are you coaching people that are in their 30s and 40s?
Mhm.
Like, it's a big thing. And, the internet, this stuff really exploded. But people just
Yeah.
being able to, you never hear them in a live Q&A, because they get asked a question, they'll be stumped, or their book read, this is rehearsed, this, you
Right.
know, stuff like that. So I've lucked out with mentors. And honestly, the best mentors I got were the free ones. Not
Mhm.
because I was trying to save money, but they didn't have those. They were just genuinely trying to see me grow.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's
I
what
like
kind of
how
advice I have on that.
yeah, I was just gonna say I like how, the question is about what lines up with your own business values, but a lot of it for you is like none of that matters unless I also agree with them on, outside of work. So yeah, I know people that have, put their health to the back burner and, put their business to the front, and it's cost them their life.
Yeah.
So, it's just priorities at a much higher level. Sounds like you at least, see it that way too, but some people just get way too caught up in the business side of things. They forget, the other important things that make the business matter.
Right.
Um,
There's no balance.
right. So, what can you gain from evaluating your technology and adapting solutions to increase your productivity and performance?
I think we already touched on this one a lot. Um, as far as evaluating the technology, like I had said, we switched software programs as far as for the estimation, the way that we do things with that. Um, the way that we did our inventory, we completely revamped our whole entire inventory system. As we started holding more than $1 million worth of inventory, we started running into problems and outgrew our old inventory system. To where we couldn't go into the negative, we couldn't allocate materials properly. We started running into problems with the cost of carrying inventory depreciating, not being able to effectively expense the inventory because we hadn't sold it yet, all that stuff. So, evaluating your technology is super important, and also to evaluate the technology that you have that you don't need, because I'm on so many automatic payments that if I don't actually go through and do the exercise that we were talking about before, going over our overhead, you
Mhm.
know, I might have 2 or 3 CRMs running and we're only using one,
Right.
and so many times this has been the issue for us. And in the downtime is a great time to really go through there and see what technology you're using that you don't need. You might be able to consolidate into one platform instead of, I know we use a lot of platforms. I mean, and we did this exercise today. I spend $28,000 a year on software licenses, so it would behoove me to go through these and say, hey, is there something that's also a CRM, that's also an inventory system, that's also a scheduling app, that's also has a built-in Zap into it, and does automations, so I don't have to use MailChimp or something like that. And what could we consolidate? And if we can consolidate it, to make sure that this software will be able to work together with this software. Am I going to have to get a whole nother software to work with this to make this happen now? So being able to really go through that stuff and find out where you could save money, find out where you could stop things, like I said, like the double entry, being able to, having to manually import things when you don't have to. And you got to think about it like this. If you can delegate a task out to a computer to do it for you, that opens up a whole nother space for somebody to do something else. And you don't know the exponential factor that's in there. Let's say, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but let's just say, it's a task that saves 2 minutes at a clip, but that task happens 30 times a day. Okay. So that's an hour saved out of every day. So then you start taking it further. So, okay, well, what's that a year? So there's 260 working days in a year. So that's 260 hours that was saved. And this thing only cost me $15 a month, as opposed to 260 hours paying a W-2 team member for that. So you don't realize the exponential factor in all this. And and a lot of people listening to this, they might not be there. Some of them might be way more than that, way further ahead than this. But, when you start dealing 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures in gross sales and above, just a small little adjustment of the sail on the boat makes a huge, huge difference. I mean, things that really didn't matter before, all of a sudden matter. When you add a 0.0001% on it, and you're just 0.0001% better, you're talking to the tune of, $100,000+. So really, in this downtime, if you just become 1% better or 2% better than you were last year, and you're going to bring in $10 million, in gross sales, just think of what that does for you. How much more money, I could buy a Maserati, and just get with 2% better, and set little goals for yourself like that. Say, hey, you know what? If I increase my production like this, I'm going to reward myself with this. I'm going to buy that Corvette. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy that Rolex, whatever the case might be. I'm going to take my family to Disney or wherever. I'm not saying Disney is a place to go, but, set goals and reward yourself for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, on that note with Maseratis, speaking of which, our customers are able to, purchase Maseratis after saving all the time with consolidating. Obviously, I'm joking, but with consolidating their drawings, their, material lists and their proposals all into one platform. That's exactly what you're saying. It's saving them time and it's streamlining these things that they probably have a bunch of different systems for. But really bringing it all into one place, which, is what ArcSight does. So I can't see your reaction with the video, but I'm just assuming that you're nodding your head.
Yeah, no, exactly. And honestly, and this is 100% honest, and there's a lot of people that can attest to this, that use ArcSight, that know me. And I'm going to tell you right now that from us, not even from a proficiency standpoint or efficiency standpoint, but ArcSight, we were at around 22% closing rate when we didn't have ArcSight. With ArcSight, we're at over 90% closing rate. And there's no back end work. They're there, they're done, it's on file, it's on a cloud. If there's a change that needs to be made, they don't got to put it back out there. We use My Salesman and get on there, and we can use the satellite. We can measure on there to make changes to say, hey, I want to bring it midway to the house, measure the house. Okay, the house is 40 feet wide, take it back 20 feet, adjust the drawing without ever going back out there, export and resend. So I mean, ArcSight has changed everything for us, honestly, 100% changed everything for us.
That's awesome. That's what we love to hear. And want to thank everybody for attending. And obviously you, David, thank you so much for doing this with us today. We'll be answering, more questions for people, and everyone can expect a recording of this webinar probably within like a day. So we'll be sending that too. But again, David, thank you so much for joining us with this today.
Thank you, Crystal.